What is up, everyone? Welcome to the Football Chatbox. My name is Ryan, and welcome to a Game Week 29 wildcard video. We're going to be looking at a Game Week 29 wildcard, and I know a few people are obviously, uh, a few minority are wildcarding this week. So I thought, okay, let's make a wildcard video. Let's see what we can come up with. And my first thoughts were, it's a tough week to wildcard, because there's quite a lot of uncertainty in terms of fixtures, and I also think I am because I haven't really been thinking about wildcard personally for my team. Suddenly to make a wildcard team also is not as easy, and I realized, oh, I've got to be doing this in a couple of weeks as well. Where if I'm going to wildcard in like game week 30 or 31, I kind of need to know what exactly a wildcard team would look like then as well. So like the wildcard team we make this week has to somewhat be really good. When some people in game week 30 and 31 are also wildcarding, you kind of have to be on the same page, if not at least few steps behind, because they should be having more information, so they'll be able to better prepare themselves for the upcoming weeks. So we tried our best to make it. Now, obviously, again, like I said, lack of information is a bit of a problem. The other thing that I realized when making this wildcard, now obviously my budget in terms of team value is going to be completely different to what others might have. You might have more money, you might have less money. You might also have an assistant manager chip still available, and that also leads to having to allocate funds for that assistant manager chip as well. Like if you're going to go on Glasner, for example, that's like 0.8. You need to have 0.8 in the bank. I have 1.1 here, but honestly, trying to even get this 1.1 wasn't the easiest, as you can see, because we've missed a few players that you would have thought, okay, game week 30, 31, they might want them in their teams. So if you're doing assistant manager, you kind of need that cash. Like if you're going to go on Glasner at 0.8, you probably need that cash. If you're bench boosting, then you need to have a decent bench. Now I've got a bench here, decent bench, but if you've already used the bench boost chip and you've used the assistant manager chip, then you don't have to worry too much about the bench as well. So there's a lot of factors available. So you obviously the team that you build will be completely different to what's shown on screen here, because it takes into account what situation in terms of your chips, how much money you have in terms of team value. All of that is also key information. So to try and cover all of those aspects, obviously I won't be able to build one that covers all, but I can suggest you a few other players that are not in here that you should probably have a look at and see whether you can get them into your teams. Now, this team, I've tried to build it as general as possible. The thing with the Game Week 29 wildcard and why it makes it a bit more harder is that you have to also focus for the blank Game Week 29 and trying to get the best out of blank Game Week 29 as well. And then you kind of have to look at teams that you go, ooh, now if you look at this team, for example, there is no Isak here. But you want Isak for the Game Week 32 double. Now, I had Isak before and I had to sell him on this one just to be able to get the funds. You might not be willing to, even if you were wildcarding in 29, you might not be willing to sell Isak because you probably have a lot of funds stored up on him. So that would also change this type of players you end up getting. We've kept Salah here because too much value stored. They're out of Champions League as well, which means after the League Cup, they only have the league to focus on. So Salah is not getting rested at any time soon, to be honest. We've added Livramento and Munoz. So let's talk about the bench. We've got Salah, good option, like I mentioned. We've got Livramento and Munoz. Now, Munoz, obviously, Game Week 32, Palace are doubling. They have a good fixture in Game Week 30 as well. So we've gone, okay, let's get Munoz in. We've gone for Livramento because obviously Luis Hall is out injured. If you want a Newcastle defender, Livramento is not a bad option for that double in 32. And then you can look to remove him after, because I don't think Newcastle have any other planned doubles that would appear after the double in 32. So you can look to remove Livramento after that. And we've gone for Henderson for, again, another Palace player, just to make sure you have enough Palace players for the double in 32 and potentially a double in 33 as well. Because if you're going to be wildcarding now and you have to play a bench boost and also maximize the double in 32 and 33, then you also need to save transfers, right? You need to save transfers for that bench boost where you have enough transfers to bring in other players that are also doubling. But if you're assistant manager, if you're using the assistant manager chip and not bench boosting in 32 because you probably either used it or you're going to use it later, then maybe you don't need Henderson, because you might go, I want Munoz, one Crystal Palace attacker, and the assistant manager in Glasner. So then you probably won't, get Henderson. So you kind of need to consider that as well. In terms of that, the other goalkeeper options, I've got Areola in goal here at the moment against Everton. And the reason I've done that is because there's a chance that West Ham double in 33, and their fixture would be Southampton and Brighton. So that's why I've got Areola in goal. Some of the other goalkeepers that I've looked at, obviously Cells, good fixture this week. No news about a double at the moment, but things could potentially change. But because of that, we've not gone for Cells. Newcastle, no fixture, even though they double in 32. In terms of other goalkeepers, Palace, we've got Henderson in there. And then I guess you're looking potentially, you're not going to go for Ederson, too expensive. There is Jose Sa, who has some decent fixtures. And maybe, I don't think they'll have a double. It doesn't seem like they're going to have a double, but decent fixtures for the moment. You could go, okay, I might get Jose Sa, it's a bit more cheaper, but I've gone for Areola and Henderson if you were looking at like bench boosting in 33. But if you're not, you probably can get like just Henderson or just Areola and like a 4.0 keeper or something like that. You could even have Areola and Fabianski just in case, Potter decides to switch keepers again or something like that. That's also a possibility. Now, that's basically the bench. When we're talking about other players who are not on here, we'll talk in terms of positions. So goalkeepers, we've touched on it. Obviously, with Henderson and Areola, let's go into the forwards because that's where there are a few options. Now, I've gone for Evanilson, Wood, and Haaland. I've gone for a triple forward to obviously accommodate for Game Week 29 because we have two defenders on the bench and Salah as well on the bench. That's why I've gone for triple forward. We've lost Isak in this situation. You might not want to lose Isak, then you'll be playing a back four instead of a back three in these specific situations if you don't want to lose Isak. And in that specific situation, if you didn't want to lose Isak and you still want to have Salah, trying to have Haaland and Chris Wood at the same time is not easy. You might have to lose Chris Wood if you wanted to keep Haaland, which on a wildcard I probably would look at getting Haaland in. But you might have to end up losing Chris Wood in the process because I don't know, maybe your team value is incredibly high, but I don't think most people are able to have Isak on the bench alongside Salah and also have Haaland in their team. It's a lot of cash. So let me know, maybe your team is slightly different, but Evanilson, Chris Wood, and Haaland. Now, there are a few other forwards that could become options. Now, we mentioned Isak for a wildcard that if you didn't want to sell. The other forwards that stand out, obviously Mateta is going to become an option in Game Week 30. And when we get to Game Week 30, I'll show you why it's a bit more trickier depending on whether you're playing a system managership or bench boosting. There's a few things that you kind of need to consider in terms of budget. And then who else in terms of forwards that are decent that we've not added? I mean, you could go Marmoush instead, but we've seen from Marmoush his minutes are going to be a problem, which is why Haaland is the ideal option. Mateta, I mentioned, we're not looking at any Brentford because no doubles. Bournemouth, we've got Evanilson. Aston Villa, Watkins could become an option later, not now. So for now, I think these are the forwards that kind of appeal. At the moment, given the upcoming immediate double is in 32, so you want to target those Palace and Newcastle players first. So those are the forwards. Let's go into midfield. Now, Bruno Fernandes, Kluivert, Hudson-Odoi, and Bowen. Bruno, Hudson-Odoi, Kluivert makes sense. Good fixtures this week. Good fixtures for Kluivert and Hudson-Odoi, slightly ahead as well. Hudson-Odoi obviously can be benched as well. Bruno just because a good fixture this week, and you can look to, he's also a price point midfielder where you can downgrade to a few other midfielders in that area. So it's just like a nice placeholder for a price as well. Bowen, the reason we have Bowen is because West Ham could have a double in 33. And if you're looking for any West Ham attacker, you're probably just going to want Bowen. Most wildcards are also probably going to have Bowen in their team, potentially. Unless West Ham obviously last couple games haven't looked as great attacking. But if they can improve, then most people would want Bowen because in 33, their fixture is Southampton and Brighton. That's the Southampton game. Now, if West Ham don't get the double in 33 as well, and if you wildcarded into Bowen, it's still not a bad week to bench boost as well, because again, their first main fixture is Southampton. So they'll definitely have the Southampton fixture in 33. It's the question is like whether they get that Brighton double or not as well, which depends on FA Cup results. So I've got Bowen in there, Hudson-Odoi, Kluivert, and Bruno for this week. Any other midfielders? Well, could potentially have a Brighton midfielder. Minte is not too bad. Mitoma, if you wanted to, obviously this week is not the easiest for Brighton, but they also potentially have a fixture in 33. The thing with Brighton is that next couple fixtures aren't the easiest, but 32 onwards is pretty decent. So maybe there's an opportunity to get a midfielder in 32. Apart from that, any other midfielders? We've gone for obviously Hudson-Odoi, but you could go for a slightly different Forest midfielder depending on your budget. Up to you in terms of who you would want to go. I don't think there's any wrong call in a Forest midfielder, whether that's Gibbs White or even Elanga for that matter. We don't have any Spurs players because first we have to see whether how they do in Europe. That depends. If they do well, then obviously then there's a chance of like the doubles and all. But at the moment, we don't have any Spurs players for that. Newcastle midfield, we don't have any. We don't have to focus at the moment. Can look at it in game week 32. Because like even game week 30, it's okay. Brentford is a good fixture, but Anthony Gordon might still not be available unless you wanted to go for like a Jacob Murphy or something. That's the only reason. And then, yeah, Palace again in 30 is when you're probably looking at Crystal Palace. So that's the midfield we've gone for. And now in defense, we've gone for Gabriel, Milenkovic, and Kerkez, along with obviously Livramento and Munoz, like I explained earlier. Gabriel, because Arsenal could have a double potentially. Arsenal also still pretty good defense. Milenkovic, Forest, good defense. Ipswich, good fixture. Next week is United as well, not too bad. Kerkez as well. Bournemouth have really good attacking fixtures, and Kerkez is a really good fullback as well for the next couple of weeks. So he's a good option. Those are my defenders for obviously game week 29. Now, if there were any other defenders that I would want, Ent Nouri is a possibility for the next couple of weeks, at least next 3 game weeks. No double though. That's the only thing that off-putting. Whereas Bournemouth, on the other hand, could potentially have a double in 33. It's predicted here in 36, but they could even have 33. Depends again on FA Cup. So that's why we've gone for Kerkez. Any other defenders? I mean, not really, because Brighton defense is not like the fixtures aren't easy, so you're probably not looking at Brighton defense. Robinson, no one's really going to want because the fixtures are incredibly hard, even though there's a possibility of a double in 33. City defense is one that I guess stands out that we don't have in here, and that's Guardiola. Obviously, the only reason I don't have City in here is I can't afford Guardiola unless you wanted to go for Kuzanov, if I pronounced that correctly, because they could have a double in 33, potentially, but it's the fact that they're quite expensive, and trying to get Guardiola in here even for Milenkovic is possible. But then I have no money in the bank. And for me making a video, it's a bit harder because you might have different players. So I thought I'll just show you a different option. And also because if you're looking at transfers for the next couple of weeks, it becomes a bit more harder to navigate with no money in the bank as well. So yeah, Guardiola is one. Obviously, Kuzanov is the other Man City player that I thought might not be a bad option if you're looking for a slightly budget version of a City defense cover. But yeah, those are the 2 City defenders. Obviously, you could choose to not have a Forest defender and go for a City defender if you want to do. That's your call though. Now, let's move this into game week 30. Now, game week 30, obviously this is assuming you have Henderson still. Henderson will be in goal, otherwise don't have Henderson. It's a 4.0. Areola against Wolves is still not a bad option. West Ham defensively have looked good, which is why I probably should have mentioned like even Wan-Bissaka is not too bad, but I still prefer the goalkeeper over that because he at least gets some save points, potentially for a bonus points as well. Here we haven't made any transfers, but you could look to make transfers. The reason I haven't made any transfers is because I'm not sure what status your team is going to be in. If I was to make transfers, as you can see, 1.1 in the bank. Getting Mateta might be one play for Chris Wood. If you have 2 free transfers, you could also go and remove, for example, Hudson-Odoi, or you could even remove Bruno Fernandes to an Ismail Sarr from Crystal Palace as well. Again, depends on how many Palace players you already have. I have only 2, so I can only pick one in that specific situation. Then I would have to pick between either Mateta or Ismail Sarr. And whoever you pick, you kind of have to keep in mind, because budget will play a key part, because you need to get Isak back into this team as well. So you need to think about budget as well, because if you go and get Mateta here, for the example in game week 30, right, it becomes a bit more harder to get an Isak as well for, let's say, game week 30, let's say 31, you just roll. And when it gets to 32, you go, ooh, I want Isak in here. I've managed to do it. And the reason was, oh, not really. I was 0.1 short. So again, you need to have a think about in terms of who you really want, whether it's Mateta or Ismail Sarr and budget, because you definitely want Isak as well. I've gone and got Rogers in 32 as an option. Now, obviously, I was short. Because if let's say I had 5.4, I was looking at Minte. That would have allowed me enough cash. But I went and got Rogers because I wanted to show you guys that there are other options in midfield, because Rogers, obviously, Southampton is the weak for 32, and then they could double in 33. So then Rogers will be someone you'd want on a bench boost as well. Apart from that, obviously, you already had Munoz and Livramento and Henderson. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 players for 32 double, which is not too bad. And when you go to 33, obviously, now the Palace players are not here located for a double, but if they do get that double, then you'll have another 3 on top of this. You'll have Rogers as a double, Bowen potentially, Haaland double, West Ham in Areola. You could potentially look to remove Hudson-Odoi for another double game week player. If Brighton have gone through, then you could also get a Minte instead of Hudson-Odoi. It's a bit too hard to predict up to game week 33, because price changes would happen, your teams might change, a few injuries could throw everything, all the plans differently. Saka could have been back for Arsenal, and that could also put another dent in terms of planning, trying to restructure your teams to try and fit a Saka if Arsenal were to double as well, potentially, which at this moment is looking very unlikely. But yeah, so there are a few other things, obviously, that you kind of need to consider. And it's a bit hard to tell exactly which double game because are going to be good in 33, because we don't know what teams are going to double, and lack of information is not as easy. So because of that, it's hard to predict, which is why I think you need to be open, if possible, to roll in transfers. You can bring a transfer, you can bring a Palace player in 30 to try and target. You need to make a decision on what Palace player that is. And that decision, obviously, you make it based off what happens in the FA Cup as well, because you'll need the budget. Ismail Sarr versus Mateta, there's quite a bit of budget difference, so you potentially need that cash for in the next couple of weeks. So have a think about. This is basically what I've come up with a wildcard team. It's not easy. I'm sure I've missed a few other teams that probably could have become options, but I've not added here. Again, having to add Haaland and Salah makes it hard to build a team, but it's doable. But you're going to hope that those budget under 6 million players return. You kind of need them to deliver as well to be able to have the luxury of Haaland and Salah in the same team. So yeah, let me know what I am missing from this wildcard team. Let me know if you've made a wildcard team. And let's see how different this wildcard team ends up being when we do it for a game week 30 wildcard draft, because then we'll have a bit more information based off what has happened in the FA Cup. So if you've reached up to this point, thank you very much. Make sure to smash that like button, hit the subscribe button as well. I'll have a buy sell video out tomorrow once the Europa League fixtures are also done, so that we know the bigger picture after the matches are done, and hopefully no injuries. Already Trent has been injured, so we will hopefully no more injuries, and then we'll be able to make a better video in terms of which players to buy, which players to sell. So stay tuned for that. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you all later.